Looking for a place where faith comes alive and lives are transformed? Welcome to Standard Life Christian Center, where Jesus is Lord and lives are made whole. Raising sons with selfless spirit.
We also teach you the dimension where you call the attention of the supernatural to intervene in your matter. We have come into the era where money is becoming useless. We have come into the era where the value of money keeps dropping, and most people will be caught in the web. We have come into the era where things happen to people and bring them back 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. There can be a trigger in your life that can set you back 15, 20 years. I want to appeal to every man and woman in this house and everybody that is listening to me online to take note of these 20-25 minutes I'm going to speak. Because what I'm speaking is a warning for what will happen in the next 2 years. In the next 2 years, if you go back to this message, you will find out that it's God that has spoken. When we speak based on the wisdom and the inspiration of the Almighty. Few years ago, people were shouting about the government in power, 2014 to be precise. And the new government came into power, and the value of the life of Nigerians dropped. After 8 years, Nigerians felt that the worst has been seen, that the worst has come. In less than 2 years, we have seen the devastation. We have seen the destruction. We have seen the issues and the problems. Hallelujah. Now, this morning, I want to speak on what I've captioned sustaining success through 1/5 principle. Sustaining success through 1/5 principle. If we talk about 1/5, what we are talking about is 20% rule. So 1/5 is 20% out of 100. The Pareto's principles taught us that 20% of the things we do give us 80% of the result we get. So for example, it states that 20% of your clients or customers give you 80% of the inflow of your company. 20% of your habits determines 80% of your success. That is looking at it from the place of business and investment. But that is not where I'm coming to this morning. The Joseph principle teaches us that 20% of what you set aside will determine if you can sustain wealth over time or if you can lose everything. And that is where I'm going to. So this morning, I want to speak on sustaining success through 1/5 principle anchored on Joseph principle. In the place we read in Genesis chapter 47, verse 13, I read, it said, there was no food, however, in that region because the famine was so severe, and the land of Egypt and Canaan has been exhausted by the famine. Joseph collected the money to be found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan in exchange for the grains they were buying, and he bought it into Pharaoh's palace. This morning, I want to speak on Joseph principles that is known as emergency fund. Joseph principle that is known as emergency fund. I have seen men hit by one circumstance and it destroyed their 5 years of investment. I've seen people hit by one unprecedented situation and the man lost 5 years. I've seen people come in contact with an emergency in their life and their 10 years life was wasted. It took them 10 years backward. It took them 5 years backward. It took them 20 years backward. If you read Genesis chapter 47 verse 13 down to 27, you are going to see that at first, money has value. At the time money has value, Joseph was able to purchase grains with money. After the dispensation of money value, money faded and grains took over. The next thing that faded was livestock fade. The people started trading livestock, started trading animals in exchange of grain, which represents like your work tools, your cars, your household items, your TV set, your air conditioner. Those things became worthless. Your chairs in your house, the fan you use, your dining table became worthless. After a while, it got so bad that land faded and investment faded. That the people started selling their lands and selling their investment. It could not sustain them. It got to the last part that they sold themselves. Their life became worthless. They faded completely. The Joseph principle is what helps everybody to survive famine. Famine does not represent drought only when your crops are dying in the farm. Famine represents a period in life when money becomes worthless. Famine represents a period in life when you start experiencing what we call galloping inflation. When the value of things starts escalating at an alarming rate. There are so many Nigerians today that are dying not because they don't know what to do, but because they cannot afford medical health care. The drugs you used to buy for 2,500, 3,000 naira, 5,000 naira to treat typhoid and malaria is now 35,000. So people have to go back to local herbs, go back to concoction mixtures, and it kills and damages their liver. And what happened? You notice that that person can no longer sustain. This principle will teach you how to survive. The next 2 years in Nigeria is going to be critical, and that is why I'm bringing this warning to everyone that cares to listen. If you come on social media, you go on the internet, you go on TV, what you hear is that things are getting better in Nigeria. The value of money is getting better. Inflation is dropping. When you go to the market to buy things, what you see is the opposite. What you see is the opposite. So the question is, how can a Christian survive in this environment? Because when you pray as a Christian, you fast, you seek the face of God, what God does is to bring windfall. But God will not sit down with you and teach you how to manage it to survive in famine. It is this principle that will help you survive it. That is why you notice now that Christians are becoming more frustrated in Nigeria. People are looking for alternative ways for help. The things that happened to Christians in the 80s, they survived it, happen now, they can't survive it. Some Christians before that will not go to Babalawo for charm are beginning to go to Babalawo for charm. People before that have made up their mind never to steal in their offices are beginning to steal in their offices. People before that don't cut corners are beginning to cut corners. Why? Because there must be a balance in the gospel. A pastor can come and teach you wealth, teach you holiness, teach you purity. But if you are not taught the principle to navigate through these phases, you will notice at a point in time, your holiness will drop. Your purity will be watered down. The circumstances of life will choke you, and it will choke holiness out of you. It will choke purity out of you. It will choke sustainability out of you. You will read the word of God in the morning, and you go to the office in the afternoon, and you keep up with sin. You will read Bible verses that tell you thou shalt not steal, that you should live a holy life. After reading in the morning, you go to the office, you steal in the afternoon. Why? Because the environment is becoming so hard and difficult that it takes the grace of God for you to stand on your morals, for you to sustain your principles, for you to maintain high standard of consecration and holiness. It is this 1/5 principle that will help you navigate through life. The next 2 years in Nigeria is going to be critical, and this principle is what must anchor your life if you want to sustain it. So I said we'll be dealing on Joseph principles, and we are taking a part of it that is captioned emergency fund and is anchored on the 1/5 principles of success. And that is what I want to write on this morning. How do we start up emergency fund? Emergency fund, most people start up by setting apart 20% of their income for emergency, and they set it apart in cash or in readily available stocks. That's the first thing. That's how you start. Now, for some people, 20% might not be possible because of the things you are going through. It might be 10%, it might be 5%. What are the features of emergency fund? The feature of emergency fund is that it must be readily available between 1 to 48 hours. I have seen men sold their house for lack of emergency fund. I've seen someone bought a car for 1 million, sold it for 300,000 for lack of emergency fund. Because something came up and it was so urgent, and the guy could fall back on nobody. And the way Nigeria is today, you can't find anyone to borrow money from. It is almost impossible. I had friends I could call before for 10 million, and in less than 1 hour they send it. Now you call them, they can only part with 2 million or 3 million. The ones that could part with 2 million or 3 million can now part with 200,000 or 300,000. So what happens? So when you don't understand the futures, the system you are running, because we have come into the era in this country and in the world that any Christian that does not understand the 1/5 principle will experience up and down in his life. So you can buy a car worth 2 million naira, and something happens in your life, and it's an emergency that has to do with life and death. And you come and the doctor says, we need 300,000 naira in the next 2 hours or 3 hours. The question is, what do you do? Someone can price that car for 500,000 and you'll be forced to sell it. And what happened? What you have saved for 2 years to gather is destroyed in less than 1 hour. So we have taught Christians on prosperity. We have taught Christians prayers. We have taught Christians spiritual intervention. What we have not taught them is the 1/5 principle that enables a Christian to prolong the days of evil. That gives a Christian the capacity to prolong the days of evil. There's a principle that is recurring in the Bible. Whenever a man falls into circumstance or something that is difficult, God usually asks a question: what do you have? Now, why that question comes up is because no Christian, no individual, no person on the surface of this earth is expected to waste everything he has. Nobody is created that has wisdom that he has not that will not have the capacity to set aside certain things for emergency. Most Christians have forgotten about the rules of money. When we are growing up in primary school or secondary school, they taught us about the use of money. They said there are 3 dimensions to money. There's money for emergency. There's money for savings. There's money to take advantage of other things. But as we begin to grow up, as we get mature, we begin to drop the basic principles of these things. And Christians now find themselves in tight corners. Things now pop up. We say it's the devil. But God gave us wisdom. We have the wisdom of God. So the first feature of emergency fund is that it must be readily available. And how do you store it? You store it in shares. You store it in savings with high interest. You don't use it to buy a land, because you can't sell a land in one day. You don't use it to buy manufacturing machine, because you can't sell manufacturing machine in one day. You don't use it for fixed deposit, because if you use for fixed deposit, when you venture into it, you're going to lose massively on it. You don't use it for that. You set it aside in cash, which is savings with high investment, or stocks which can be sold within 24 hours. The second feature of an emergency fund is that it must be up to 3 to 6% of your living expenses on a monthly basis. So if your expenses in a month is 50,000, your emergency fund should not be less than 180,000 kept aside. That's the minimum, 3 to 6 months. The third one feature of your emergency fund is that it must be higher than your long-term savings, but less than your investment savings. The principle is captured in Genesis chapter 47, verse 13. And that is exactly what Joseph did. The Bible said that Joseph had a dream, interpreted the dream of Pharaoh to him. He said there are going to be 7 years of plenty, and there are going to be 7 years of famine. And the first thing that Joseph did was to advise the king that in the first year of famine, money will have value. But after the first year, money will become worthless. And so what did Joseph do? Joseph started using money from the king's palace to buy grains, to buy food, to buy seeds, and started storing them in silos. And after 1 year of famine, money lost its value. The people had money, there was no grain to buy. The people had bad money, there was no food to buy. So they came to Joseph and said to him, our money is now useless. Our money is worthless. We can't do anything with it anymore. What do we do with it? He said, give me your livestock. They started giving him their goats, their cattle, their camel. And after a year or two, getting into the third year of the famine, they exhausted all their livestock. They came back to him and said, we have exhausted our money, we have exhausted our livestock. What next? He said, give me your land. They started selling their land to him. After like 1 year, in making it about 4 or 5 years into the farmer, they have exhausted all their lands. He has bought all their lands. And they came back to him and said, what next? He said, give me your life. You become a servant to the throne. The only land that was not touched was the land of the priest. Why? Because the priests were already servants to the king. You saw how Joseph, through Joseph's principle, based on the emergency fund, was able to navigate through famine for 7 years. And people that lacked the 1/5 principles were enslaved by it, and they died. You can be a Christian and be frustrated in life. You can be a Christian and it appears as if God does not answer your prayer. God answers prayer. else. But what I've noticed in life is that knowledge is open to everyone. When you seek, you find. When you knock, the door opens. When you ask, you receive. Knowledge is available to everyone. He said, with all thy getting, get understanding. He said, buy the truth and sell it not. Christianity, faith does not replace principle. And that is one thing I'm teaching people in this ministry. Faith is not a replacement for principle. Faith is not a replacement for truth. You can operate in faith in some emergencies, but some emergencies will swallow you up even with your faith. If you were working in the factory in the time of Jonathan and you were earning 30,000 naira and you were setting apart 5,000 or 7,500 on monthly basis as an emergency fund, when you come into the era of the president of Buhari and your income drops by 100%, your 30,000 is worthless. If you now come into this era where your income has dropped by 400%, what you are earning is useless. Money is now worthless. That is why most Christians now are frustrated, because this truth was not taught. And the danger is the same thing is repeating itself. In the next 2 years, you will see what will happen. We are not prophet of doom, but what we do is that we watch patterns. We watch systems. We observe how it works. I don't need an angel to appear to me that when my government start borrowing more than it can sustain, that the preceding months and years are going to be worse. I don't need the Holy Spirit to speak to me that when my company borrows more than it can sustain, and when my MD starts living a reckless life, that company will fold in 6 months to 1 year. I don't need an angel to speak to me. The facts are there. The principles are written on the wall. If I'm a Christian of wisdom and intelligence, I know that it's time to increase the emergency fund. I know that is the time to stop certain things. The effect of this is that once, what has happened to Nigerians is this. When we got into this emergency, into this degradation, into this destruction of the country, the first thing that became worthless was the tools of our work. Our industry started folding up. Things became worthless. When we move further into what we are seeing now, our land is becoming worthless. A time will come when you will put land for sale. In certain areas, nobody will be able to buy it. So the question is, what do you do? And that is the two places I'm going to anchor. The first way to survive and sustain wealth through emergency fund is the principle of seed. Now, the principle of seed is a principle of having something that can serve both as an investment and as food. Number one is farm. Number one is what? Is farm. A farm can serve as an investment and it can also serve as a readily product for food. So if I have 4 plots of land and I cultivate it, if I need money, I can sell some produce for it. If I need food, I can walk into it. So it can be physical farming, which is the one you farm on your land. It can be things like animal husbandry, which is rearing stocks, like flocks, like sheep, chicken, whatever. It can be other kinds of farming, like body of water, like fish and the rest. It can be vegetables, a lot of things like that. That's the first principle of seed. So let me tell you what Joseph did. When famine came into the land of Egypt, there's no way the king could take authority over the nation. But what the king did was, he started buying with all his money. And somebody will ask a question: why would the king spend all his money at that time? Because the king was wise. He was properly advised by Joseph. Joseph told him, money will be worthless in no time. Spend all the money you have. Transfer your money to physical assets that can be changed to food or investment you can use as capital. Do you know at that time in Israel, a bag of grain is worth more than a plot of land? Nobody will eat your land. It got so worse that if I bring one bag of grain and give to you, you can give me 2 plots of your land, because your land is worthless. You don't eat sand. You can't go and be chewing your land. The land became worthless at that time. So the first principle that he used in this is the principle of seed. The principle of seed is that he started buying stuff that he could easily feed on and could easily change to investment. So let me tell you what most Christians are doing. We come to church, we do prayer and fasting, we pray, there's an open door. Money comes into your hand. You buy a big car. You buy a big car. You buy jewelries. But nothing is set aside for emergency. A man that is pressed by emergency is a dying man. Whenever you find yourself in emergency, you don't talk about value. It is the buyer that determines the value of the product. You have no power to negotiate. Your negotiation power is dead and buried. Years back, a 419er bought a car for 1 million naira. In 3 months' time, the money he was expecting to pay for his house rent didn't come. So the landlord gave him quick notice to pack out in 1 week. He sold the car for less than 400,000. A car he bought for 1 million, he sold it for less than 400,000 within the space of 3 months. The value of the car dropped. Why? Because the person buying was the person negotiating. He gives you what he wants. Now let me ask you this question. And that is where we have found ourselves in Nigeria. The effect is that the loss of tools, cars, household items is becoming worthless. The number 2 is that the loss of land and investment. The number 3 is the loss of life. People are beginning to lose themselves. Some people are beginning to die for it. Let me paint a picture for you. What happens to a man that has a car of 5 million naira but does not have an emergency fund of 1 million naira? And something happens to him, maybe him or his wife, and is rushed to the hospital, and the doctor says we need 1 million naira deposit in 2 hours for this person to survive. What happens to that man? If he does not have an emergency fund, he can sell the car of 5 million naira for 1 million naira. Because at that time, anybody that has 1 million can say, give me your car, you drop the car key. Because what you are looking for is 1 million. And that is the value. If it's a land, what you're looking for is 1 million. Because what people do at that time is that they take advantage of you and they mess you up. And it's a principle in life. You can't blame them. So what do I do as a Christian? And that is what I want to stop. Most people don't understand how life functions. When God created everything, He created it with a balance. He created it with a balance. Now, why did he create it with a balance? The reason is this. If you are looking, God created the sun that gives light. But he didn't stop at the sun. He created backups as stars. He created moon that will assist the sun. So there are 3 layers of backup. You have the sun, you have stars, you have the sun. God created water. When he created water, he created vapors in forms of gases that are backup, that can react and turn to water and come down. So for everything that he created an emergency plan for it. That is why if you are a woman, you don't have one egg. You have thousands of eggs. What you need to give birth to a baby is one. Why do you have thousands? If you are a man, there's not one spermatozoa in your sperms. You have thousands or millions of it. Why? Whenever God creates a thing, he creates emergency for it. And so what men of wisdom have done is to look at creature and look at nature and study nature and they started bringing out principles in nature to guide their life. Because for every principle that sustains the earth, it is the same principles that sustains the occupant of the earth. The principle that sustains Nigeria is the principles that sustains the citizens of this country. How do you come out of this quagmire? How do you beat this thing that is happening? How does a Christian remain holy and faithful? How will you maintain a life of purity and holiness? How will a Christian stay and not steal? How will a Christian stay and not cut corners? So there are principles that guide these things. So when we come, we preach holiness, we preach purity, and we'll tell you we have stayed holy, we have stayed pure. We are not just staying holy and staying pure. We have principles that enable us to stay holy and pure. A Christian might not steal to buy a new car. But if your only child is dying and you need money, you might be forced to steal to do it. A Christian might not steal to buy a necklace. But if your wife or your husband is dying and you need to provide money for 1 hour and there's money outside, you can steal it to save the life of the person. What do you do to get to this level where you are morally ensured to live a holy life? You must apply the principles of 1/5. You must set aside 3 to 6 months of your living expenses as an emergency fund. One thing I've noticed about life is that you can reduce expenses for needs. You can't reduce expenses for emergency. I can decide to eat fish this month because I don't have money. If a doctor tells you that the operation is 500,000, he can't do it for 150. He can't do it for 300. He can't do it for 400. It's 500, it's 500. How you get the money is none of his business. But I can decide to spend 50,000 naira for feeding this month. And next month I spend 30,000. How do I do it? I cut down on some things. You don't cut down on emergency. You don't have the power to cut down on emergency. You can cut down on necessities. You can cut down on needs. But you can't cut down on emergency. And that is why this is a principle, a very solid principles to life that you must keep as a person. So, I round up. I have a app that they call Chika app. In that Chika app, I bought shares. Those shares, you sell it, you can get it in 48 hours. There was a time I used to do high savings in real money. You can liquidate it in less than 48 hours. There are other things you can do to keep it aside for emergency. Why? What can destroy your 5 years of investment? Because the devil is intelligent, and as Christians, we should be more intelligent than him. What can destroy you as a Christian? What can bring you down is emergency. What can waste your 5 years of investment is emergency. 10 years of investment is emergency. The mistake most Christians make is whenever resources come into their hand, they set money aside for necessity, they set for long-term savings and investment. They neglect emergency. The emergency comes, destroys the long-term savings and destroys the investment. But if you keep it aside, it sustains. It becomes a hedge fund, something you can fall back on. Somebody says, Pastor, I don't understand what you're talking about. Can I say something? I have seen families that don't have HMO cover. They did personal HMO cover for themselves. You know what that is? That's an emergency hedge fund. Your company does not provide it. You provided it for your family. So for 1 year you are covered. There's an emergency, you run to the hospital. The doctor draws on the HMO to take care of your family. You don't need to go and sell a valuable to get it. There are diverse ways to get invested in this thing. God sent me this morning to tell you that the next 1 year and 6 months, if these principles are not applied, some people will lose valuables. Some people will lose something that they have kept as treasure. This principle is not difficult to apply if only you will master the truth. I recap. Emergency fund must be readily available within 1 to 48 hours. 2, it must equate 3 to 6 months of your living income. That is the minimum it must be. 3, it must be higher than your long-term investment, but less than your savings investment. Once you master this, you can take things gradually. Your life can be sustained. There's an adage they say in Igbo land. They say, Mberede nyiredike. Mberede kajamadike. You know what it means? You only know a strong man when unforeseen circumstances and unplanned expenses hit him. What happened to your family in 6 months if you lose your job today? What happened to your family in 3 months if you don't have a job today? What do you fall back on? Let's turn to our faith. He said, with all that buying, buy wisdom and sell it not. We have come into the era where these things have become necessities in the body of Christ. The man that has emergency fund will buy the investment of the man that does not have emergency for 10 years, for 20 years. The man that understands the principles will be able to sustain success over a while. When I tell people that every year I get stronger, richer, I don't have downtime. It is not something that answers to prayer. It is something that answers to principles. I don't have downtime. I am richer every year, regardless of who is in power. It is these principles that have kept me. I learned it the hard way, but I made up my mind never again. What happens if they come to you and your landlord said they just bought over the house where you are living and the house will be sold in 3 months? The question is that what will you do? Will you be houseless? Is it that you not have roof over your head? Do you not need to sell your car to get a house? Or you start selling your jewelries and your property? No. What do? You fall back on your emergency funds. You pull a little from your savings. With ease, you make it up. And life is simple. And nobody. So my landlord comes to me. He said, I'm increasing my house rent by 50%. I don't need to be looking for a new house to park into. I don't need to be looking for a new house to park into. I've lived in places where it just come 1 year, they increase your house rent by 50%. I don't need to look for a new house. I just go back to emergency fund, add it, then increase the emergency fund, and I'm calm. It's not because you have so much, it's because you have mastered this principle. Every principle that is being taught in school is captured in the Bible. If you read the Bible very well, you understand this. I learned this from the Joseph principle when I started reading Genesis chapter 47. Take out 1 minute and ask God for grace.
Standard Life Christian Center, raising sons with selfless spirit. Join us at 15 Osolo Way, opposite UBA at Jawo Estate, Lagos, Nigeria. Worship with us every Sunday at 9 a.m. Don't miss our healing and communion service every last Friday of the month at 10 p.m. A powerful night of miracles and restoration. Catch Senior Pastor Paul Adumoha live on Lasgidi 90.1 FM Saturdays at 9 p.m. Need more info? Call 0814-834-7456 or 0813-644-3190. Follow us on Facebook at Standard Life Christian Center and subscribe on YouTube at Pastor Paul Adumoha.